My parents shut me out every Christmas until I bought a mansion. Then they arrived with a locksmith and forged papers to claim it. They had no idea police and reporters were waiting inside the dark house for them to force the door. I sat in the dark and listened to my brother pick my lock. The entire house was black. No tree lights, no porch lamp, not even the little digital clock on the microwave glowing in the kitchen. There was only the cold pressure of a December night against the windows, and the sound of Travis on the other side of my front door doing what Travis had always done, taking something that did not belong to him, then telling himself it did. I knew his laugh. I had known it for 38 years. It was a short, low sound, more breath than voice, the kind of laugh he made when he already thought he had won, as if the punchline belonged only to him and everyone else in the room was just background noise. I heard that laugh through my front door at 9:04 p.m. on Christmas Eve. I was sitting in my armchair wearing my good coat, with a folder resting in my lap, and I did not move. I did not need to move. Filling the dark house with my own silence was not the only thing I had done to prepare for that night. For 20 years, there had been no chair for me at my family's Christmas table. I want to be exact about that, because people hear something like that and assume I mean it as a metaphor. I do not. I mean a real chair. A physical place that was missing. Every Christmas, my mother set the dining room table like it belonged in a holiday catalog. Cloth napkins with embroidered edges, the good plates with the gold rims, pine cones dusted with fake snow from a can, and candles in brass holders she stored in the sideboard for the rest of the year. With the leaf in, the table in the dining room of the house on Carrier Street seated 8 people. For most of my childhood, there were 7 people there. My parents, my mother's sister Diane, and her husband Roy. My brother Travis, Travis's best friend Connor, who came every year because his own family situation was complicated, and me. 7 people, 8 seats. My mother still set 7 places. The first Christmas I remember it clearly, I was 8 years old. I walked into the dining room looking for my usual chair, the one with the slightly wobbly left rear leg, and it was gone. The chair had been removed, and the sideboard had been pushed into its place. My mother came out of the kitchen and saw me standing there, staring at the empty space where I was supposed to be. She crouched down to my level in that particular way she did whenever she was about to explain something I would not be allowed to argue with. She smoothed my collar and said, "We can only set so many places, honey." I ate Christmas dinner on a stool by the stove. From there, I could hear the conversation rising and falling in the dining room, the sound of a full table that did not notice something was missing. By the time I was 12, I had stopped expecting the chair. By the time I was 18, I understood the chair was not an accident. It was a statement, a permanent one, and I had 2 choices: keep absorbing it forever or leave. I left Carrier Street with 1 bag, $40, and a promise I made to myself on the bus out of town. Someday, I would own a place with my name on the door. A place where I decided how many seats there were. A place where nobody could look at the table and make the math come up short by exactly 1. I built that promise from a yellow bucket, and that is not a metaphor either. At 22, I started a residential cleaning business with a yellow plastic bucket from the dollar store, a secondhand mop, and a 2003 Honda Civic. I slept in that Civic on 11 separate nights during the first 8 months, not consecutively, which I told myself made it better. Now, I understand that was just a way of not counting accurately. I had no startup capital, no family backstop, and no safety net. What I did have was a willingness to work, and I understand now that it was partly real ambition and partly the specific energy of a person trying to prove something, not to anyone in particular, but to the arithmetic of that stool by the stove. 15 years later, Charlotte's Clean had 4 vans, 11 employees, and service contracts with 37 households in the highest income zip codes in the county. I had learned bookkeeping from a YouTube series in 2013. I had taken a small business management course at the community college in 2015. I reinvested every dollar I could bear to part with until the business became the kind of thing that generated more money than I could immediately put back into it. Then, I started saving. I saved for 3 years. After that, I found the house on Aldrich Street. It was 3 stories, with a wraparound porch, brick from 1912, and a backyard with an oak tree older than the house itself. It had high ceilings, original molding, and a front parlor with east-facing windows that caught the morning light in a way I noticed on the first walkthrough and thought about every day for the 2 weeks it took to close. I paid $487,000, my own money, every dollar documented. When my real estate attorney, Ruth Calloway, slid the deed across the table, I read the relevant line 3 times before I signed. Ruth had spent 24 years in property law and had closed more residential transactions in that county than anyone else I had spoken to. The line said, "Grantee, Charlotte Ann Booth, sole owner. I drove to the house on Aldrich Street alone. I sat on the wraparound porch in the October cold and looked at the oak tree. I did not perform anything for anyone because there was no one there to see it. I just sat there for a long time. It took 3 weeks for the news to travel through channels I had not used in years. My mother called on a Tuesday in late October. Not a holiday, not a birthday, a random Tuesday afternoon, which had not happened in longer than I could precisely remember. Her voice had the warmth she saved for people she needed something from. She said it had been too long, that she would love to come see the new place, and that she was so proud of me. I thanked her and said I would let her know once I was settled. Travis texted 2 days later. Congrats on the house. How many bedrooms? What did you pay? Who's it under? Just you? I read that last question twice. Just you. Not, is Sam splitting it with you? Not, did you go in with a partner? Those would have been questions from someone asking about ownership because they were happy for me. Just you was the question of a man measuring an asset and trying to figure out how many people stood between him and it. Travis was 36 years old and had made a long series of financial decisions I will not detail, except to say they had compounded in the way bad financial decisions do. The number I eventually learned was approximately $90,000 in outstanding obligations across several categories of lenders, some patient and some not. I did not answer his text. The next morning, I called Ruth. I told her about the questions, the timing of my mother's call, and what I knew about Travis's situation. Ruth went quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Charlotte, I want to tell you about something called deed fraud." I spent the following afternoon reading everything she sent me. Deed fraud, also called title fraud or property theft, is exactly what it sounds like, and exactly as simple as it sounds, which is what makes it so dangerous. Someone forges your signature on a quitclaim deed. They file it with the county recorder's office. In most counties, the recorder's office does not verify signatures. They verify formatting. They check that the document is structured correctly, appears properly notarized, and comes with the correct filing fee. Then they stamp it. On paper, your house now belongs to whoever is named in the grantee line. The worst part is that many victims do not find out immediately. You might not learn anything is wrong until you try to refinance, sell, or until someone else tries to take out a mortgage against your property and a title search exposes the problem. By then, the person who filed the forged deed may already have borrowed against the property, sold it, or disappeared. Ruth told me that in residential cases, 9 times out of 10, the person behind it was a family member. Someone who knew the property existed. Someone with enough personal information to create a convincing document. That afternoon, I enrolled in the county's free property fraud alert service. It monitored the recorder's database and sent an immediate notification the moment any document was recorded against property registered to my name. Setup took 12 minutes. I told no one. The alert came on December 3rd at 4:47 p.m. I was at my office on Renner Street, reviewing payroll for the week, when my phone buzzed on my desk. I looked at the notification, read it once, then read it again. A quitclaim deed had been recorded against the property at 714 Aldrich Street. Grantor, Charlotte Ann Booth. Grantee, Travis Michael Booth. According to the official county records, I had signed my house over to my brother at 2:23 that afternoon. At 2:23 that afternoon, I had been in my office since 8 in the morning with employees present. I had not left for lunch. 3 people could place me inside that building at the exact time I had supposedly signed away my home. I sat at my desk for about 90 seconds. Then I picked up the phone and called Ruth. "It happened," I said. There was a pause. "When?" she asked. "Today, 2:23 this afternoon." When Ruth found her voice again, it had a quality I had never heard in all our professional dealings. Something between fury and satisfaction. The fury was for me. The satisfaction was for what came next. "Come in first thing tomorrow," she said. "Bring everything." The county recorder's office opened at 8 in the morning. I was there at 7:48. I requested a certified copy of the recorded deed and held it in my hands at a standing counter in the lobby of a government building on a Tuesday morning. I read it carefully. My name was in the grantor line. The signature was not mine. It was a reasonable approximation of my handwriting, close enough to pass a clerical review, but not close enough to survive a forensic comparison. The notary stamp belonged to a notary public named Gerald Finch. I had never met Gerald Finch. Gerald Finch would later tell police that the woman who appeared before him on December 3rd and identified herself as Charlotte Booth had presented a driver's license and signed the document in his presence. As far as Gerald understood it, he had done his job. He was not charged with anything. He was a victim of the fraud too, his professional seal used without his knowledge of the deception. I photographed every page of the certified copy, front and back, and then I drove to the police station. Detective Raymond Foster had been with the Property Crimes Division for 16 years. He was the kind of investigator who listened with his whole body, still and attentive, like he was building a structure in his head, while you spoke and wanted every piece before he committed to the shape of it. I put my folder on his desk. Inside were the fraud alert notification, time-stamped 4:47 p.m. on December 3rd, the certified copy of the forged deed, printed screenshots of Travis's texts, including "just you," and a voicemail from my mother's number dated November 18th that I had not yet mentioned to Ruth. In that voicemail, my mother's voice, and another voice I recognized as Megan, Travis's wife, could be heard in what sounded like a speakerphone conversation. Megan was asking whether the county recorder's office actually checked signatures or just accepted whatever was filed. The voicemail appeared to be accidental, a pocket dial during a conversation that was never meant for me. I had listened to it twice, saved it in 3 separate places, and said nothing to anyone. Detective Foster looked at the folder for a long time. Then he looked up at me and said, "Ma'am, I've been doing this for 16 years. I have rarely had a victim walk in this organized. I run a business," I said. "I keep records." He laid out what came next with the directness I had been hoping for. The forged deed was a felony, first-degree forgery, filing a false instrument, fraud, and potentially multiple additional counts depending on what else surfaced. But the problem with deed fraud prosecutions, he explained, was that perpetrators often realized the fraud had been discovered and stopped before they could be caught trying to exercise possession. To make the case airtight, the most useful thing would be to catch them attempting to act on the fraudulent deed, entering the property, trying to take possession. He looked at me and asked, "When do they believe you're away from the house?" I knew the answer before he finished the question. "Christmas Eve," I said. "I haven't spent Christmas in this county in 20 years. They know I'm always gone." Foster looked at me with the expression of a man confirming an architectural decision. "Then that's when they'll come," he said. I called Dana Reese on December 10th. Dana had been a journalist for 11 years, the last 4 of them covering financial crime and consumer fraud for the regional paper. She had written a series in October on deed fraud, and her byline had appeared on 3 of the 4 most thorough pieces I had read during my research. She was 34, methodical, and she had the quality of a good investigative reporter. She was interested in the story, not in being the story. I told her what had happened and what was planned. I told her Detective Foster had approved press presence at the anticipated arrest on the condition that she stayed within law enforcement parameters for the evening. I told her the story was hers if she wanted it. She was quiet for a moment. Then she asked, "Why a reporter? You have the police. You have the documentation. What does press presence add?" I thought about my mother's voice on that accidental voicemail. I thought about 20 years of Christmas tables set for 7. I thought about Travis standing in my front hallway with a forged deed in his hand, telling a room he thought was empty that I had never belonged in a place like that. "Because I want a record that doesn't depend on what my family says afterward," I told her. "I want a witness who isn't connected to any of us. I want it written down by someone whose job is to get it right," Dana said. "I'll be there." Christmas Eve arrived gray and cold. On December 8th, I had returned my mother's voicemail with careful casualness and told her I was spending Christmas out of town like usual, visiting a friend in Pittsburgh and leaving Christmas Eve morning, then coming back after New Year's. My mother had sounded warm. She said she hoped I would have a lovely time. She asked if I might be able to visit in January. I parked 3 streets over on Mercer and walked back to Aldrich in the dark. The house was cold because I had turned the heat down to 48 degrees. Every window was black. The porch light was off. From the street, 714 Aldrich looked exactly like a house whose owner had gone out of town. Detective Foster was already inside with 2 uniformed officers from the district, Officer Carla Vance and Officer Dale Moore. Dana Reese was in the stairwell with a camera, and the particular stillness of someone who had waited in worse places for more uncertain outcomes. Foster positioned himself in the dining room, visible from the hallway, with a clear sight line to the front door. I sat in the armchair in the front parlor with the same folder in my lap that I had brought to his office 3 weeks earlier. The same 2 documents sat on top, the deed with my name on it, and the fraud alert that made sure I knew first. I turned off my phone screen and waited in the dark. At 9:02 p.m., I heard cars. Slow tires on a quiet street. The specific caution of people trying not to be heard. 2 doors closed gently, then a third, all with that strange, careful softness people use when they have decided the normal volume of ordinary things might betray them. Their voices were low. Travis spoke first. "Told you, place is dead. She's probably off somewhere feeling sorry for herself." Megan's voice came next, sharper. "Keep it down. Just hurry up." Then I heard my mother. "Are we sure about this?" There was a pause, and Travis said, "Mom, the house is ours now. It's legal. We already filed. We're just coming to take what's ours." Then I heard the locksmith. It was a different sound, the professional quiet of someone who knew what he was doing, working a pick in my deadbolt with the efficiency of a person being paid for a result, not an experience. 2 minutes passed, maybe a little less. Then came the click of the lock, followed by the unmistakable sound of my front door swinging open into the dark. For one beat, they stood on the threshold, adjusting to the blackness. Travis walked in first. I could hear him before I could see him in the hallway. His footsteps had the quality of someone entering a space he had already decided belonged to him. He walked heavier than necessary, occupying the floor with intention. He had the forged deed in his hand, and he actually held it up. Would you look at this place? His voice was doing the thing it had always done when he was performing for an audience, even an audience of 3 people in the dark. All of this for her, and now it's ours. He turned in a slow circle in my front hallway. My eyes had adjusted by then, and I could see his outline. My mother stood behind him near the door, still wearing her coat, holding her purse with both hands. Megan stood to his right, already looking toward the kitchen with an assessing expression. Then Travis laughed. That same laugh I had known for 38 years. She never belonged in a place like this anyway, he said. She never belonged anywhere. I reached over and turned on the lamp. Light flooded the parlor and spilled into the hallway. The effect was immediate and complete. The 3 people standing inside my house froze in the sudden brightness, blinking while their faces performed the rapid sequence of recognition, confusion, and recalculation. Detective Foster stepped out of the dining room with his badge in hand, held level, not raised dramatically, just present. He had the stance of a man who had been in this professional moment enough times to find the efficient version of it. "Detective Foster, property crimes," he said. "I'm going to need everyone to stay where they are." Officer Vance appeared from the kitchen hallway. Officer Moore appeared from the back of the parlor, where he had been standing in a corner I could not see from my chair. Dana came down the stairs with her camera up, already shooting, the shutter quiet but present. Travis's mouth opened. He looked at Foster, then at the officers, then at Dana and the camera, then at me, standing now in the parlor doorway with my folder in my hand. The forged deed was still in his fist. "What? What is this? What did you do? Charlotte, what did you do?" His voice had a quality I had never heard before. Not anger, though anger was coming. Not calculation, though that was coming too. First, there was something rawer and more honest, the specific sound of someone who had just realized he had walked into the wrong room and could not walk back out. I looked at my brother and said, "Merry Christmas. You can put the deed down. The officers would prefer you didn't wave it around." Officer Moore crossed the hallway and said, "Sir, I'm going to need you to set that document on the table." Travis looked at the deed in his hand, then at Moore, and set it on the hall table. My mother had not moved from the doorway. She was still gripping her purse with both hands, and I watched her face carefully. It had moved through the same sequence Travis's had, but it arrived somewhere different. Travis had landed on recalculation. My mother had landed on something that looked, for the first time in my memory, like genuine comprehension. She looked at the house. The high ceilings, the original molding, Dana's camera, Detective Foster, me. Then she looked at me for a long moment and said, "Charlotte." It was not a question. It was not an apology. It was just my name, spoken the way people speak when they are trying to locate themselves inside a version of reality that has just been substantially revised. "Hi, Mom," I said. Travis and Megan were arrested at 9:34 p.m. on Christmas Eve. The charges included first-degree forgery, filing a false instrument with a government agency, criminal fraud, and conspiracy. The locksmith, a man named Perkins, had been hired through a cash transaction and cooperated immediately and completely once he understood what had actually happened. He was not charged. He gave a full statement that night. Dana Reese's story ran on December 26th with photographs. It was the lead story in the regional section and was picked up by 2 wire services by December 28th. The photographs showed the forged deed on my hall table, Detective Foster's badge, and my front parlor in the lamplight, looking exactly like what it was, a house that belonged to someone, filled with people who had waited for the truth to arrive. My mother was not arrested. She had not signed the deed, had not filed the deed, had not hired the locksmith, and had not entered the property in a criminal capacity under Foster's assessment. What she had done was stand at the scene while aware of the plan, and that was a question for the prosecutor's office to evaluate as part of the broader case. I did not participate in that evaluation, except to provide my statement, which I gave to Foster on December 26th, once, completely, and without revision. Ruth Calloway filed a quiet title action on December 27th. It was a legal proceeding meant to confirm on the record, permanently and unambiguously, that the fraudulent deed had no legal effect and that 714 Aldrich Street belonged to me, solely, without cloud or encumbrance. The action was resolved in February. The judge's order was 4 pages long, The relevant conclusion was one sentence. Title to the property at 714 Aldrich Street, County of Redacted. Vested solely and completely in Charlotte Ann Booth. I had that sentence framed. It hangs in the front parlor, next to the east-facing windows that catch the morning light. My mother called in March. I had been thinking since January about whether I would take that call, and I had decided I would take it once, see what it contained, and make later decisions from there. That is how I make most decisions now, sequentially, based on information as it arrives, without committing to outcomes I cannot yet see. She talked for a while before she finally reached the thing she had called to say. She told me she had not known about the deed until it was already done, which was partly what I had suspected and could not fully verify. I had decided not to make that the centerpiece of my assessment of her. Whether she had known the specific mechanism of what Travis was planning was a complicated question. Whether she had understood, in the general shape of things, that something was being arranged was much less complicated. That was the question I cared about more. Eventually, she got to the thing. I should have set a place for you, she said. Just that. Quiet and direct, without the softening language she usually wrapped around anything she was acknowledging. Yes, I said. You should have. She went quiet. I don't know what to do with that, she said. I know, I told her. Neither do I yet. That is where we are. It is not resolution. It is not repair. It is two people who share a history and a name and a significant distance between them, trying to find out whether anything is navigable inside that distance, or whether the distance is simply the accurate shape of things now. I do not know the answer. What I do know is that I am not eating Christmas dinner on a stool by the stove to find out. Last December, I hosted Christmas for the first time. I set the table in the dining room with cold gray east light coming through the windows and the oak tree bare in the backyard. I used good plates, cloth napkins, and candles I had bought myself. There were 7 people there. 3 employees from Charlotte's Clean and their families, Ruth Calloway and her husband, Dana Reese, and a neighbor from 2 doors down named Hector, who had shoveled my walk twice without being asked. When I knocked on his door to invite him, he looked surprised in the specific way of someone who does not expect to be included in things. I set 8 places, 8 chairs, 8 settings, 8 napkins, folded the way my mother had always folded napkins. Not because I was performing anything, but because she had taught me, and the fold was the fold. Every seat was full. Hector brought a pie he had made himself from a recipe he kept in a card box his grandmother had left him. It was the best pie I have ever eaten, and I told him that. He looked at the table with the expression of a person who had found something he did not know he was looking for. I know that expression. I recognized it.